There are stories we hear that stick with us, not because they're loud, but because they whisper something eternal. Let me take you to a moment, not in some fantasy land, but in a stark white lecture hall at one of the most elite institutions in the world. A place where minds compete like titans, where a name matters, and so does the face behind it. The room was silent when he entered, this young black man, no older than 19, carrying a worn backpack and quiet eyes. He didn't strut, he didn't announce himself. He simply walked in, took a seat at the back, and opened his notebook like he had done it 100 times before. He didn't wear anything flashy. No designer logos, no expensive shoes, no loud accessories. Just simple clothes and a look in his eyes that spoke of stories untold. But to most, he was invisible the moment he walked in. You could feel the judgment settling like dust across the room, from the front row to the chalkboard. A few students exchanged smirks, a couple raised eyebrows, and the professor, a man with accolades stacked higher than the books on his desk, a mind sharpened by decades of academia, lectures, and publishing. A name that carried weight in lecture halls around the world, but even the sharpest minds can be dulled by pride. He saw the young man and looked right through him, not a flicker of recognition, not a trace of curiosity. Just another seat filled, another number on the attendance sheet, and that's the weight of first impressions. We carry them like silent verdicts, letting appearance dictate worth. The ones who speak the softest are often dismissed first. The ones who don't look the part are assumed to not belong. But sometimes, the most powerful minds are wrapped in silence. Sometimes, the ones who walk in without fanfare are the ones who will change everything. That young man didn't need attention. He came for the challenge, and while they all looked past him, what none of them realized was this: the greatest answer in the room had just walked in and sat at the back. Midway through the lecture, the professor turned with a smirk that carried years of arrogance. Without warning, he scribbled a sprawling equation across the board, quantum entanglement theory, laced with multivariable derivations, a brutal labyrinth of logic and mathematics that most seasoned scholars would hesitate to tackle. It wasn't just a question. It was a trap, a flex of authority designed to intimidate. He scanned the room with an expectant gaze, arms folded, waiting to see who would dare. "Anyone want to take a shot?" he asked, his tone thick with mockery. It wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge meant to expose weakness. The room froze. Students glanced at each other, some smirking nervously, others looking down, pretending to scribble notes. The silence stretched until it began to hum with tension. Then, from the very back of the room, a voice broke through, calm, grounded, unshaken. "I'll try." The young man said, heads turned, some rolled their eyes, a few chuckled under their breath. The professor raised an eyebrow, amused. "Please," he said, stepping aside, "by all means." All eyes followed as the young man rose and walked to the front. No swagger, no nerves, just a steady, unbothered focus. He picked up the chalk not with hesitation, but with familiarity, like someone greeting an old friend. Then he began to solve. Step by step, he unraveled the maze on the board, not rushing, not stumbling. The room shifted. Silence grew dense. Smirks faded into awe. Because challenge doesn't break you. It doesn't make you something new. It simply peels away the layers, the assumptions, the doubts, until only the truth remains. And that day, the truth was clear. He wasn't just ready for the challenge. He was the challenge. He didn't just solve the problem. He dismantled it, rewired it, and reimagined it from the inside out. While the others were still trying to grasp the question, he had already rewritten the rules of the answer. He started at the end and worked backward, peeling layers of logic with a precision that stunned even the most seasoned minds in the room. The professor, once smug in his challenge, stood frozen, watching a brilliance unfold that no credential could have predicted. The room didn't just fall silent, it transformed. You could feel it, a subtle electricity in the air, the kind that comes when something undeniable has entered the space. There were no shouts, no applause, just wide eyes, stiff postures, and the heavy recognition that someone extraordinary had just changed the atmosphere. This wasn't about appearance. It wasn't about who had the latest shoes, the loudest voice, or the most polished resume. Genius doesn't wear a label. It doesn't always sit in the front row. Sometimes it hides in quiet corners, behind second-hand notebooks and worn-out backpacks. But when it's called upon, when it is given a sliver of space to breathe, it ignites. His genius wasn't inherited from any title or elite school. It was lit by sacrifice. It was fed by long nights under dim lights, by questions asked into the void, by a grandmother's whispered promise that, "You will rise, baby. You will rise so high they won't know how to measure you." That fire, unseen by many, dismissed by most, was always burning. Genius has no color, no costume, no permission slip. It only needs oxygen, and once it gets that, it changes everything, not just the problem. Not just the room, but the people in it. When he finished, the young man didn't boast. He didn't smile or search the room for validation. He didn't try to defend himself or prove anything further. He simply set the chalk down with quiet finality, handed it back to the professor, and walked back to his seat. No applause, no smugness, no words, just the kind of calm that comes from someone who knows exactly who he is. The room was frozen, not in fear or awe, but in realization. Silence took hold, not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that demands you listen even harder. It was the stillness of a collective moment, where even the hum of the air vents seemed to fall quiet. Eyes that once held doubt now followed him with a mixture of surprise and quiet respect. This was not how they expected the story to go, because sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't a shout. It's not the pounding fist or the raised tone or the desperate need to be heard. Sometimes the loudest voice is stillness, confidence without noise, truth without drama, mastery that doesn't need applause to know it's real. The professor stood there for a moment, his face unreadable. Then, with a slow nod that carried the weight of a shifted perspective, he asked the only question that seemed to matter. "What's your name?" The young man looked up, his voice even unshaken. Michael Freeman." And that was it. No speech, no lecture, no need to gloat. He had walked in a question and walked out a statement, not through confrontation or rebellion, but through clarity. He had taken their mockery and turned it into reverence, not with force, just presence, quiet, undeniable. Your light is yours. Don't let them dim it. Don't let them define it. Don't let them shrink it into a version of you that makes them comfortable. There will always be people who walk into a room and think they know who you are by your skin, your silence, your clothes, your background. They will try to fit you into their labels because it's easier for them to believe in boxes than in brilliance. Let them try, but don't ever let them succeed, because the truth is, your light doesn't need their permission to exist. It doesn't wait for approval. It doesn't dim because someone chooses not to see it. Your light is truth, it's strength. It's the fire that's been forged from everything you've been through, everything you've survived, everything you've dared to dream. You don't need a stage or a spotlight. You don't need someone to clap or nod or give you space, because you are the space. You carry it with you. The moment you show up fully as yourself, unapologetically and unafraid, you disrupt the narrative. You change the atmosphere. You make it impossible to ignore what they were never prepared to understand. That young man walked into a room that misjudged him, but he didn't shrink. He didn't defend. He didn't even speak first. He let his presence do the talking, and when the time came, he didn't just meet the challenge. They watched him redefine it. So when they laugh at you, it's not you they're laughing at. It's the idea of someone like you rising, someone like you succeeding. But when you rise anyway, when you break every limit they set for you, they won't be laughing anymore. They'll be listening, and they'll never forget your light.